a grey infrastructure approach to a blended or a green approach. With co-benefits, we mean the social, environmental, and economic benefits that come from nature-based solutions. Looking at the social benefits, having a greener city is making it more healthy. It can also help with water quality. Economic benefits could be having more land for timber harvesting or artificial constructed wetlands and ponds for aquaculture, which can provide economic benefits. Or environmental benefits are carbon sequestration, increase of biodiversity, etc., which is a number of different benefits that come with the package and really need to be built into the equation to make a proper cost-benefit analysis. And we also feel it is supporting the whole 2030 agenda, while we are mainly talking about water, but nature-based solutions can really help with sustainable production patterns, sustainable cities, reduce inequalities, help with the health, economic growth, decent jobs, energy supply. Nature-based solution can also provide biofuel. So it's really tech connecting to a number of the SDGs that we have agreed on. Last part of my talk, what needs to happen to make it happen, that we really upscale nature-based solutions in water management. This is another section of the report that we discuss. And the classical thing is we need more money. Which is true, and of course we need resources to invest, but it's not necessarily more. It's also fully utilizing existing resources and directing them in the right direction. And redirecting them into a more balanced way of green and grey infrastructure solutions can really help to use the existing resources more effectively. Leveraging financing through different payment schemes. One is the classical payment for environmental services, where downstream water users paying upstream either farmers or landowners that ensure that certain certain environmental services are provided, for instance, freshwater fluxes, low flows, etc., etc. That kind of compensation scheme is called payment for environmental services, and there's quite a number of different successful schemes globally there, which are also discussed in the report. And finally, it needs a proper regulation. Nature-based solutions are sometimes difficult to put into a regulation because people say, we don't really know how they function, we don't know how much they reduce the design flood. Therefore, it's very difficult to put into legislative frameworks. However, let's learn from Peru, which mentioned green infrastructure explicitly in the law system, or the HIMA system, which is also particularly referred to in the National Rangeland Strategy here in Jordan. HIMA system is something which is at least 1,500 years old from the region. In Saudi Arabia, we have some examples of more than 1,000 years old systems, and we seem to have forgotten about it. And now Jordan is taking yet again the lead with this engineer Zulat Ali to help us to remind us about the power of nature in sustainable management of water. Two more slides. People often say, well, nature-based solution, this is complicated because you have many stakeholders, you have many farmers, landowners, other stakeholders need to be involved in the process to ensure that they are happening. Well, which is true, but it's not that classical grey infrastructure solutions are always easy, that you can just build dams and pipes and so on. It also needs a participatory approach, which is long and complicated. But on the other hand, if we manage to do this, the flip side of the coin is that a joint vision is developed with all stakeholders that can really help to develop a joint vision to implement a sustainable water management with nature-based as well as classical grey infrastructure solutions. And finally, unfortunately, Princess Sumaya isn't here today, but as an ambassador for science and peace, and really stressing the critical role of research and education, we believe that more research is needed to be able to understand the functioning of these systems, and also to be able to understand them such that we can put them into design guidelines. And that also includes understanding traditional knowledge, local knowledge, like the HIMA system, and really helping us to understand how it really functions and how it helps to increase water available, reduce the overexploitation of groundwater, or improve water quality, as it is demonstrated in a number of sites in Jordan. With this, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank you for your attention, and again, a big thank you to the Italian government who financed the developmental report, and a special thanks also to the Sultan bin Abdulaziz Al Saud Foundation for the supporting the translation into Arabic. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Stefan, for this presentation. And may I say, indeed, nature-based solutions is a frontier that we need to conquer, or may I say reconquer, as it has been conquered or addressed by our ancestors. However, it seems we have been overwhelmed with our water issues, and we have forgotten many of these nature-based solutions. So thank you for ringing the bell for us. And as I said, this is a frontier that we really need to reconquer. So with this, I think we conclude the first session about the launch of the Arab version of this valuable report. Of course, the thanks are extended to all agencies who have contributed to the building of this report, and I use the word building because it was building blocks. And of course, our thanks are also extended. I join my colleagues in thanking Sultan bin Abdulaziz Foundation for sponsoring the translation of this report into Arabic, and thus making it available to the Arab audience, to the Arab specialists, to all Arab speakers all over the world. And of course, thanks for all of you for attending. Now, I guess, Engin.
I'm here, sir.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, try to find you.
Mr. Chair, thank you very much for your chairmanship. And I also would like to thank the valuable speakers for sharing with the audience their wisdom, their experience, etc. We really appreciated that. Now, we are moving to the second part of the program, and I would like to invite all the honorable speakers to join the audience. I realize that we are slightly running behind the schedule, so if you have other sessions, whether you are organizing or whether you are one of the speakers in the sessions to follow, please feel free to leave in your convenience. Now, with this, I would like to invite you to move to the other side, please. Yes. And I would like to call upon the four expert panelists who will respond to one particular question in less than 3 minutes. Dr. Gaid, please. Yes.
Just I want to say only a few words. Can you allow me just for 1 minute?
Please, go ahead.
Just I would like to announce that recently the EAW has get the Integrated Management System certificate in ISO 9001, ISO 14001, and ISO 45001.
Thank you. Now, our panelists, Carol, please. Carol Sharfane, who is the Chief of Water Resources Section, Sustainable Development and Productivity Division in ESCWA. Mr. Jean-Marc Forêt, who is the Regional Program Coordinator for the Near East and North Africa. He works for FAO. And Ali Hayane, yes, IUCN. He is the Regional Water Coordinator. And lastly, you already know Dr. Gaid Fariz, who is the Director of UNESCO Regional Bureau for Science in the Arab States. Dr. Gaid, if you could please remain. Yes, my first question will be to you, Dr. Gaid, if you allow me. Dr. Gaid, during the earlier presentations and speeches, we clearly heard the importance of using the shared water resources in a sustainable manner. When we look at some publications, when we look at some news items, we see that some circles consider shared water resources as a source of potential conflict in the region. But I know that UNESCO in the region, as well as in the headquarters, are developing a number of projects, implementing a number of projects in the region, so that we give the clear understanding to people and decision makers that, in fact, water does not create divides. Water is to build cooperation. It's a bridge of cooperation. Can you please reflect from your experience and based on what UNESCO is doing in the region?
Well, thank you very much for this question. I'll try to be very precise and concise. As you rightfully said, water diplomacy initiatives are in the heart of our UNESCO plans and vision in the region. We envisage water diplomacy addressing cross-boundary issues in an equitable, sustainable manner as one of our key areas of intervention in the Arab region as well in the world at large. Along with that, and we strongly believe that water, yes, there are lots of water conflicts, there are lots of conflicts associated with water distribution. Sometimes these conflicts are potentially or could potentially be escalate. We understand that, and hence we feel it's our obligation to try to mitigate the situation as much as we can, so we can turn the equation upside down from conflict to conversion and into development. So, along with that, we have been acting, of course, as you know, there was the Friends Nile initiatives, other initiatives about sharing information, data, etc., that have been going on for some time with UNESCO contribution and with UNESCO sponsorship. Recently, however, I should say that many of these initiatives, yes, they did succeed in many issues. Maybe we had some joint trainings here and there, joint activities. However, I don't think that we have achieved the goals. The issue of water still persists. The issue of how to address water diplomacy is still pending. Now, recently, we have been working on a new initiative, which is about water science diplomacy initiative, which is a little bit, we think that it is different from previous approaches. And the basic message that we are trying to say that all previous approaches are well respected, etc. However, we are still suffering from the water problem. So we are trying now to flip the equation. Instead of talking about water as an entry point, we are actually looking at non-water solutions as entry points to the water issue. And our basic approach that we are trying to promote right now is the mutual benefits approach, which is basically trying to identify a mutual benefit socioeconomic interventions, not necessarily to talk about water to start with, that could be beneficial for 2 or more countries in the region. So this is our basic, shall I say, approach. Tomorrow we will have, I don't want, now of course there are other initiatives in the region, but this is our major initiative that we have launched in broad lines here in the, first addressed here in the Dead Sea about a year ago. Now the initiative is picking momentum with the support of our colleagues from the League of Arab States and with the engagement of several Arab states, or almost actually all Arab states, Arab Water Ministerial Water Ministerial Council, Arab Water Ministerial Council have endorsed it in principle. So this is the basic initiative that we are about, which is again based on mutual interest. So this tomorrow there will be a session about that will address this initiative in more details. I think at around 3 or 3:30, and I would highly, of course, I invite all of you to participate in this, and where we will benefit from your feedback and inputs. Thank you.
Dr. Gaye, thank you for your clear response. My second question will be to Carol. Carol, you know this much better than I do. The water resources in the Arab region are very scarce, and the situation is getting even worse due to growing population, and secondly, due to changing consumption patterns. Now, this already bleak situation might in the near future become even worse with the onset of climate change. Now, from the content presentation and other speakers, it was clear that nature-based solutions can help improving water resources management, improving the water quality and availability. How do you, from your point of view, or from ESCO's point of view, how do you evaluate the effectiveness of nature-based solutions in climate change adaptation and mitigation in the region? And are there specific examples that you would like to give from intended nationally determined contribution reports?
Thank you very much for this opportunity to speak, distinguished guest. Linking the nature-based solutions to climate change is fundamental, and when we think about things in the present and we think about things in the future. And I just want to very quickly, because we know that time is late, just highlight some issues when we think about the ability to cope. This region is going to hit by the end of this century up to 5 degrees temperature increases. This region is going to hit a crisis in water availability that is affecting water vulnerability in terms of the water resource and water dependent sectors. This is a reference period, and look how it's going to get darker in some places at the end of the year. When we think about not only water, but rangelands, we were hearing right now about Jordan with HEMA and different ways to protect the rangelands. We think of what's available now and what will be happening in the future. You can see that parts of the region will not be able to cope because there won't be water allowed to maintain livestock. The rangeland are done, and this will have socioeconomic implications for herders and the bedroom. And that's what I want to focus on also. Nature-based solutions allows us to draw on traditional knowledge and ecosystems that are green and readily available, that might not need all the investment that is there before. And when we see the adaptive capacity to deal with the stresses of climate change, we see that in fact maybe we can draw upon these through nature-based solutions that are more locally appropriate and less costly, that can overcome the adaptive capacity constraints that we have, for example, when we think about rangelands availability for livestock. Same thing for wetlands. We don't have a lot of wetlands in this region, but these are sources where we can control flooding. We see, however, that our vulnerability over time of the wetlands is going down. And the adaptive capacity is, again, not up to par to deal with the challenges, where things like natural canals, wadis, different systems that exist in our region can be called upon to improve our adaptive capacity. And then finally, when we think about forest, again, we don't think of forest normally when we think of our region, but it is an issue, especially in the northeast and in the Sudan and, of course, Somalia. Well, we see that, in fact, most of our region is very, the forests in our region are very susceptible to climate change, and in fact, that those can be a co-benefit where we can use forests and natural foliage and reforestation initiatives to, in fact, combat both climate change on the mitigation side and also effects dealing with land degradation, land subsidence, etc., that we are facing with climate. So basically, there's a lot of eco-based systems that can be used to draw upon to enhance the integrated water resource management. We heard about, for example, what's being done with the marshlands in Iraq, Litani, what's going on in other parts of the region. What I wanted to highlight is, again, as with other things, the countries are aware of these tools. The question is if they want to prioritize the tools. We see already in several INDCs, so the national determined contributions that were adopted even before the Paris Agreement came into force, already reference a lot of nature-based solutions in their agreements when they try to prioritize adaptation over mitigation. And these are some examples where they are exactly fixated and include issues about mangroves, wetland restoration, forestry, etc. So there is hope, and maybe even when we think about the next round of national determined contributions that we prepared in 2020, we'll be able to move on with expanding this area of work. So thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Jean-Marc, my next question will be for you. This is a fact. Today, there are practically 800 million people who are hungry. Given that the world population is around 7.7 billion, this clearly shows us that 10% of the global population is hungry. And when we look at the projections, population growth projections, we know that by 2050 there would be 2 billion people more living on this planet who will need some food as well. And when we put everything into this equation, we see that the ultimate target for 2050 is we need to increase food production by at least 50%, if not more, so that there is enough food for all those who live on the planet. So I have two quick questions. Can this substantial increase be achieved through usual approaches? And what role do you see for the nature-based solutions for meeting this target?
Thank you very much. So I don't know. Okay, thank you. You gave a few very important figures. I would start by saying that there is no more nature-based solution than agriculture. Agriculture is the prime interface between people and nature. We draw our food from nature. There is a figure that's very interesting. You just said we are 7.7 billion people on Earth. A calculation was made that if we were still hunters-gatherers, we would get our food from nature. Nature would be able to provide food for about 600 million people. So less than 10% of this. So what's the difference? The difference is the agricultural revolutions that have progressively allowed to produce more food for a growing population. And that has accelerated in the 20th century in line with population growth. So that has been a great success. If we look only at 50 years from 61 to 2011, you can see that the productivity of agriculture, of land, has doubled. That means that we need 2 times less land to produce food for a person. That's good news because, as Stefan said, there is not enough land to grow exponentially into agricultural production. The problem, this has been a great achievement that we all know is called the Green Revolution, but the problem is all the consequences that has had. We have been great in chemistry, in biology, but we have gone too far. Now we end up with degraded land, no more water in our aquifers and in our river, and a very alarming situation in terms of biodiversity and agricultural biodiversity, plus all the social costs that we know well associated with some agricultural practices. So clearly, your question about can the business as usual continue, the answer is no. And the SDGs, the Agenda 2030, give us the path to follow. We have focused a lot on productivity, on let's say on the economic, the production side of sustainability. It's now time to really look at the other 2 dimensions, environmental and social. And the point, and it has been said by others before, the point is that if we are more careful, if we look more carefully at how we can enhance the services that the ecosystems give us, we do have solutions. We cannot anymore accept the quick fix of putting a lot of fertilizer on our land and finding that most of it ends up in rivers. We do have approaches like agroecology, or some people call them agricultural ecologic intensification, that work. It has been proven that you can substantially increase productivity in agriculture through approaches that are much closer to nature. Yes, we are not going backwards to the past. Some of those technology require